Okay, let's start again and try if it works this time. Looks like it's working now. Can you hear me? Is everything okay? We had a previous live stream and we had a bit of a technical issue. So now we're gonna have to start this live stream again. If anyone can comment, please, that you're hearing me properly. What's that? Trying to sabotage? Okay. The Mossad is trying to sabotage the live stream? No, I think they have more important tasks at hand. Okay, how's everyone doing? Good. Okay, cool. All right. So I chose to have this as a live stream. Wa alaikum salam. Hello, everyone, and good evening. To discuss the ICJ ruling today against Israel, and I opened it as a live stream so you can also share your views as well with me. Now, a bit of a background. Obviously South Africa took Israel to the ICJ because, according to them, they breached the genocide convention that Israel is signed to. Thank you, Jeffrey, very much. And they obviously had a couple of hearings. Today, they went out with a ruling. So what people need to understand is that this is an order. So what I'm going to try and establish today is facts, brief facts as to what happened exactly. And then obviously start talking about what we think about it, what you think about it, and where it can reach. So South Africa took Israel to the ICJ for breach of the Genocide Act that Israel is signed to. Thank you, Daniela. That's very kind of you. They had a ruling out today calling Israel to cease from committing genocidal acts. Genocidal acts that Israel is supposed to not undergo genocidal acts. Poor little Israel. And the brief details about what it's ordering Israel to do is stop killing people, stop mentally harassing people, let aid in Gaza, and don't have any breaches with anything to do with genocide convention, basically. And I mean, when it comes to the ICJ, there's one very important thing to note here. The ICJ is the judicial organ of the United Nations. The United Nations has already had so many rulings and judgments and all sorts against Israel, whether when it comes to establishing a Palestinian state, whether when it comes to the right of return to the refugees, whether when it comes to supporting the resistance, glorifying the resistance. I mean, the United Nations, they called Auntie K, thank you. They called the Palestinian Intifada heroic. And they condemned the nations that did not support the Palestinian Intifada in 1987, the United Nations. So what we really need to understand is, Francis, thank you so much. You're so kind. What we need to understand is, I'll get to all of the comments in a sec, by the way, after I finish the introduction. The fact that the ICJ is the judicial organ of the United Nations needs to clarify where they stand exactly. And a very important example to understand what's happening today before anyone sets any expectations, although who wouldn't be happy not seeing Israel condemned in the international court? Do you know what I mean? Who wouldn't be happy to see that? But if you look at what happened between Russia and Ukraine, so Russia started the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Feb 2022. Less than 1 month later, on the 16th of March, The ICJ already had a ruling against Russia telling them to stop the war immediately. There's a big difference between telling someone stop the war immediately and telling someone please stop your genocidal acts. Okay? But saying that, this is expecting steps from Israel. What was Israel's response? Previously, Benjamin Netanyahu said, no one will stop us, not the ICJ nor anyone else. Today he had a statement and he said, alongside other ministers in the Israeli government that obviously had more ridiculing comments on the ICJ, but Benjamin Netanyahu said, we are committed to international law in our war in Gaza, but at the same time, we're also committed to our security. And he also played up the obviously Jewish card, and you're against the Jewish state. They love to play up this anti-Semitism card whenever anyone criticizes Israel. And he didn't say that he won't listen to the ICJ, but what are they expecting from Israel? So it's not telling them stop the war. It's not telling them stop the killing. It's not telling them anything very severe. It's just telling them stop your genocidal acts. It's as if someone has been like, how can I give you a more kind of simple example here? You're in your house. A group of gangsters come outside your house. They start bashing it, throwing grenades in your house, shooting your family members, looting everything, burning people, all sorts, stealing organs, yeah? And then the police come and tell the gang members, can you please stop bullying this person? Please stop bullying them. This is what the ICJ is telling Israel. I mean, in a brief, small example. And the fact that we have so much gap between what they ruled against Russia and what they're ruling now says it all, really. However, they're expecting Israel to stop the genocidal acts, and they're expecting Israel to file a report. So Israel has 30 days from now to submit a report to the ICJ and tell them, you know, we stopped our genocidal acts, or we weren't even carrying out genocidal acts. This is what they're saying. They're denying that they're committing any sort of genocide or ethnic cleansing. I mean, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister of Israel, he just posted a comment saying, Hag Shmag. You know what I mean? Ridiculing. And this is Israel, which leads me to my opinion, really. I mean, I said it from the beginning, you know, we, the Palestinian people, we have never put any faith in the United Nations or in any international organization to bring justice, because you have so many resolutions, so many rulings against Israel that have been nothing but ink on paper since 1948, and every time something hopeful comes along in the United Nations or in the UN Security Council, it gets vetoed by the United States or by multiple countries that are permanent members of the UN Security Council. So I wasn't expecting anything from the ICJ anyway, to be honest with you. I mean, the good thing is that it's creating a bad image on Israel, really. But in terms of actually implementing something, I highly doubt, even if they told Israel, you need to stop the war now, if they would be able to do it, because it's not just about rulings, it's about enforcement. And who's going to carry out this enforcement exactly? The people who are also signed to the Genocide Convention, who the United States, supplying Israel with weapons to commit this genocide, who Rishi Sunak and the British government, the EU, who turn a blind eye to what's happening in Palestine. They'll look at Palestine from here and look at Ukraine like this. I remember this popular caricature that was published a couple of months ago. So we're not expecting much. I think I think the biggest hope really for the Palestinian people is the perseverance of the Palestinian resistance, is the continuation of the global pressure, is the continuation of spreading awareness to the actual crimes and people acting, whether it's through media, whether it's through writing, activism, protesting, any activities that can awaken people, clarify what's happening. Because I've always said when it comes to committing crimes or bringing new laws, um, introducing anything new, you need to legitimize it in the minds of the people. That's why the media is so responsible when it comes to wars, when it comes to misinformation, when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to lies, because what they're effectively doing is legitimizing what's about to happen. The rotten flesh, thank you so much, that's very kind of you. And everyone else, I'll get to the comments in just 1 second, and I'll start opening the opportunity for you to share your thoughts as well. So with regards to what's gonna happen next, I mean, I don't see anything happening really, because even if Israel submits a report and then they're gonna have time to kind of prove that there was a genocide, I mean, and take any potential action. And again, who's gonna take this action? Who are the people who are allied to Israel? So the most important thing is the Palestinian resistance strength. This is what makes Israel do things. This is what kicked Israel out of Gaza, the Palestinian resistance, not speaking with them, because unfortunately, you've seen what happened with 30 years of negotiations with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. It's been nothing but giving Israel legitimacy to continue and expand, continue its aggression, continue building settlements, continue the aggression against the Palestinian people, the oppression. Everything that you're seeing in Gaza, but in smaller and prolonged periods. That's in the West Bank. So I think what's gonna happen on the ground will make things either happen or not happen. So previously, the Palestinian resistance forced Israel to submit to its conditions when it came to the ceasefire. Now it's looking like we might head towards this direction, but it also depends on the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu, and whether he sticks to his current far-right allies, or if he goes and forms another government with other politicians, because we've had reports that he might form a coalition with Yair Lapid, and then he can have less of a burden from the extreme far right in Israel, because they are the ones who are constantly also pushing him towards more extreme actions. They're constantly threatening him. If you're going to stop the war, we will get out of the government. You won't have a coalition. That's Itamar Ben-Gvir. He said, if the war stops, we're not in the coalition, we're not in the government. Smotrich, he said that, who's the finance minister, another very radical figure, who supports the eradication of everyone, including the Palestinian citizens of Israel. He said that stopping the war now wouldn't be good for the whole campaign. It would negatively affect us, and it would basically help our enemies. So this is my verdict. This is my take in brief about this ruling today. Not expecting much of it, really, as I haven't before. I've never put any faith in any of these institutions. And I'll open the comments and start seeing what you guys are suggesting, or if you have any questions. If you wouldn't mind, if someone posted a comment previously, you can start commenting again. Michael Van, Israel mentioned the Holocaust again. Yeah, they do. This is what they do. They weaponize the Holocaust and anti-Semitism to cover up racism and supremacy and genocide against other people. This is what they always do. Munzir Shihab, when this war ends, will the Palestinians be able and willing together, or will there be tensions between Fatah and Hamas? Look, the people have no problem. When it comes to political leaderships, I think we all know clearly who has popularity nowadays in the street and in Palestine and across the world. Hamas are gaining popularity because they're the ones who are actually standing up against Israel and fighting against them. Who else is doing it? I mean, the Palestinian Authority has been doing nothing for the past 30 years. Just, coordinations with Israel. They don't move unless they're authorized by Israel. So the people have no problem. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue. Sefi, what's the hope next then? The hope is in the continuation of action that we know we can do and can potentially contribute to bring a peaceful resolution. Now, it's nice to say that when we're sitting here, right? In all other countries apart from Palestine or Israel, because on the ground people are fighting. So lots of it will depend on the outcome of that fighting. But this is why I say the success of the resistance is very important, because in my opinion, they will be successful because they don't have anything to lose. I mean, anyone who would carry out actions like the Palestinian resistance, these people are not worried about their lives. I mean, it's very common for Palestinians to say in Gaza that they are a campaign of martyrdom because they're dying anyway. Like Gaza before the 7th of October was an open-air prison. Anyone under the age of 17 didn't have any hopes of going anywhere. I haven't seen anything but Gaza for all of their life. You had over 60% unemployment, no opportunities, limited electricity, limited food, relying heavily on foreign aid. So with all of that, they have nothing to lose. That's why they fight till literally the last breath. Whereas Israel, on the other hand, they can barely recruit people to join the army. I mean, people have unwillingness from the army. They're split from the inside. Particular brigades from the army itself are torn. The political leadership is torn. They're using draconian measures and such high levels of censorship and propaganda against their own population to just try and hang about, really, because many people know what's going. We live in an open age of social media, people being able to share things very easily and very quickly. So we're hopeful number one, I mean, from my perspective, I'm a faithful person, so I'm happy with everything that's written for us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you're talking about uh, what's gonna happen on the ground, it's the actions, it's mainly the Palestinian resistance, and in general, the continuation of the momentum that this war built with the level of awareness across the world, and people shouldn't undermine how effective their actions are. Marvin, thank you very much, and anyone who is sending super thanks, I really appreciate it. Goody Weaver, do you think the court specifically did not rule a ceasefire to provide cover for Western nations to keep supplying arms and money to Israel? Yes, of course. Because like I said, why were they so quick when it comes to Ukraine, and why was the wording stop the war immediately for Russia less than 1 month after their invasion in Ukraine? Yet after 4 months of brutal genocide, and by the way, back then, nothing had happened in comparison to what's happening in Gaza and has been happening for the past 4 months. So, and bear the fact that, remember that it's an organ, it's a judicial organ for the United Nations, the ICJ. And that says it all. And what is the UN, and who was the UN built by, really? The United States primarily. And how does the UN act internationally? It acts as the soft power of the American empire, really, the US elite. This is how it is. This is what the UN is. So for anyone expecting, anything serious from them, I wouldn't put my hopes up high. Munzir, thank you so much. You're so generous. Barakallahu fikum. Any news or updates on Lebanon Hezbollah? Yes, very intense stuff happening. Apparently, they're using a new missile, Hezbollah. And I spoke about apparently a phosphorus RPG that landed on Israel that could potentially be Israeli, and as a pretext to attack Lebanon more severely, because we've had more and more attacks, more and more threats, from the Israeli defense minister, Yoav Gallant, against Lebanon. And we're hearing many reports about the fact that they're withdrawing people from Gaza, preparing them for Lebanon. When it comes to Israel, you need to understand, if what Hezbollah is doing happened without the 7th of October, as if, let's say it's a normal day, and Hezbollah is doing whatever they're doing, although it's not full-scale Hezbollah, I mean, in my opinion, it isn't 10% of what they're capable of. And I'm not being, I'm not exaggerating here in terms of their capabilities and what they have used. But if that happened and there was no war on Gaza, you would be talking about an all-out war already from day one. So Israel would have done to Lebanon what they've done to Gaza already. So the fact that they have so much threat from Lebanon, that their settlers are uncertain and they don't want to go back. Over 40% of them, the other day, Haaretz reported that they don't want to go back to the northern settlements. And over 80,000 were evacuated from the northern settlements, an area which already has a problem in terms of Jewish demographics, according to Israel, because the Galilee area is an area that's populated mostly by Arab Palestinian citizens in Israel. And lots of Israeli politicians always had a problem with that. They don't like the demographic shifting. And obviously I spoke about many times about the demographics changing altogether after the 7th of October, with over 1 million fleeing. That's up to only the end of November. Add to 1.2 at least, not including their children living in Israel beforehand. And I also mentioned the previous video, like the World Zionist Organization, they had a poll just last week, I think, saying that 80% of Israelis abroad will never go back to Israel. They said they didn't never want to go back. So to them, it's a catastrophe. If you're not going to return the 150,000 to the surrounding regions of Gaza, which is a very important region in terms of agriculture, in terms of production, lots of milk, fruit, veg, many factories are in the areas surrounding Gaza. And these people are telling the government, they're living in hotels now, we're not going to come back. We're not going to go back with this level of threat. And obviously many people are leaving the country anyway. They were like, the Zionist dream has ended, Israel has ended, the idea of a Jewish state. So with Lebanon, they're very furious, and we could see an escalation. The question is, realistically speaking, if the decision makers in Israel have any sort of brain, and from what they've done, it doesn't look like they have any ounce of brain from what they've done, they might go insane and go and attack Lebanon and punish the civilians of Lebanon rather than Hezbollah, because they constantly say, we'll destroy Hezbollah. You can't destroy Hezbollah like you can't and won't destroy Hamas, because you're talking about an idea. And what they've done in the past 4 months, I think it probably created hundreds of millions of people hoping to end Israel altogether, not even apartheid. Do you know what I mean? Because I constantly speak about the dismantling of apartheid and an implementation of an equal state, a democracy where everyone can live in equally. But many people who see these things and are new to them or have discovered what's happening very recently, they tend to be fuming more than the Palestinian people, by the way. And like some people tell me, I don't realize how you talk calmly sometimes about such atrocities, because we know them and we know what's been happening ever since you're born. So they might take action, and if they do, it's gonna make their end even quicker. Because if Israel stopped the war, imagine that, if Israel stopped the war, they just retaliated quickly against Hamas, for example, just for their own image sake, and then they stopped the war. People would think the Palestinians are the bad side. They wouldn't look into anything. To them, they'll buy the mainstream narrative. Oh, poor little Israel, they were attacked by this terrorist organization and they committed a massacre. Obviously, all lies, debunked. And they will stand with Israel. But by doing what they did so far, they've opened everyone's eyes to what's happening. And I also said previously, Israel has done the pro-Palestine campaign what no other Palestinian or pro-Palestinian organization has ever done in history, with the level of awareness, no matter how much videos you had, or lectures, or universities, or movies, you wouldn't have made what Israel has done in terms of awareness because of their atrocities. And, thankfully we have social media, and people can see what's happening. So that's the answer to Nariman the Khatib. Francis Fitzgerald, what can we do to help in some way? I show support, contribute money, but it's not enough. Yeah, like I said previously, any activity is good, people sharing news, informing people, posting, liking, raising awareness. All of these things are important, because usually these people, when they want to commit crimes, they rely on people's ignorance. That's why they always try and hide the truth. They'll scare you off with the terrorism labeling initially, so that you believe one side is bad and the others are angels. They would cover up their crimes, and it works with many people, obviously. I mean, the people who run the show, they have intelligence. They know how to control and manipulate people. So the fact that you're going against that on its own is something good. And don't underestimate what you're doing, because you know, physically you can't physically go to Gaza and do anything, right? They hardly have aid going in, let alone people. Like I also feel like I want to volunteer in rebuilding and helping people, right? And that's an option. Maybe after the war ends, people can go and volunteer, maybe with education, maybe with anything really, rebuilding, healthcare, whatever it is, and that would be great. But if it's possible, you know, remember the flotilla that went with aid to Gaza previously? They shot them in the middle of the sea. So anything outside, really, I mean, in general, obviously it's good to send money if you know a charity. That's obviously good and registered. Um, but then it's the awareness. It's talking, sharing, discussing, and not losing your sanity and sense of humanity and sense of justice. This is very important, because when you talk about the subject, it's easy to it stirs up hate, right? And racism and all of these things. And it's important to stay right, to stay on the right path, and not lead your anger or emotions get over you, right? All of these things are important. So don't underestimate any of that. Can Palestine or Israel coexist? Anon, anon. Look, they already coexist in many ways. Like, I was born in a mixed city, they call it, in Israel, right? I'm a Palestinian Muslim. We have Palestinian Christians. We have Jewish Israelis, religious or non-religious, and people live together. So yes, of course. Now, where do the problems lie? There's a core problem. The core problem is the regime of supremacy. That's the core problem. The core problem is that there's a state there established on ethnic and religious supremacy. It's even implemented by law, right? You have the nation state law that was introduced that said Israel only belongs to the Jewish people. Not that, you know, it needed more elaboration following 1948 and what they've done with the ethnic cleansing, but it just highlights that there, if the core is rotten, eliminate it. If you eliminate that rotten core, and people are treated equally, and obviously Palestinians get their historical rights when it comes to right to return, very important, when it comes to day-to-day rights, when it comes to housing, when it comes to movement, when it comes to permits, when it comes to education. I'm talking all across Palestine, not just Israeli traditional territories pre-1967. I'm talking about everything. That can't happen when you have people living under apartheid in many parts of the country, and the Palestinian citizens of Israel treated as Class B citizens, telling them that this country is not yours. You know, someone coming from 70, 75 years ago, telling an indigenous person who's lived there all of their life, oh no, that's not yours, because God promised it to me 5,000 years ago, and they have nothing to do with Judaism, many of them. So the coexist, of course, coexist, because we coexisted for centuries. Uh, we coexisted. I mean, if you look at the Shomronim, for example, As-Samiriyun in Arabic, they are the most ancient Jewish tribe in Palestine, and they live in the middle of the West Bank before Israel. These people have Jewish scripts from a very long time ago. And they have the Mount Temple, according to them, is not where Israel says it, Al-Aqsa, because they want to destroy it, Israel and Zionism. They want to destroy Al-Aqsa to build supposedly to Solomon's temple that was never there. But the actual original Shomroni Jews, they believe that Har Grizim is the Mount Temple. And they have archaeological evidence to support it, unlike what the Zionists do with Al-Aqsa. They have never found any evidence relating the whole compound, and they've digged everything underneath it to Solomon's temple. So yeah, of course, people can coexist very easily. Um, let me see any other question. Anon, why is Egypt's border with Gaza closed? Yeah, I spoke about this yesterday. It's because the Rafah border between Egypt and Gaza is a three-way thing. In 2005, Israel had an agreement with the then Palestinian Authority before Hamas and Egypt that any aid or any equipment going into Gaza needs to be verified and approved by Israel, similar to what Israel does with the West Bank, where it controls anything that comes from Jordan. So that's why it's complicated. Like when the Egyptians say we are opening the border is open from our end and Israel is delaying it. It's difficult for people to understand, and they'll constantly attack Egypt. And I'm not trying to defend Egypt's position or whatever here. I'm just saying things as they are. It's a three-way thing. Like some of the authority goes back to the West Bank sometimes, because to Israel they made a deal with them and they're not in power in Gaza. Imagine how stupid that is. But I said yesterday that up until when are you going to wait before you take an action yourself and just say, no, I'm sorry, you know what I mean? People are going through genocide and they need aid and we must stop this. So that's the situation with the border. John Klein, will this ruling put any pressure at all on Washington? You see, they were kind of worried because although it's their creation, the United Nations, their creation, the ICJ is an organ of the UN. It's the judicial organ of the UN. They can't, uh, they can't shoot themselves in the foot, because it'll send a message to the world that, look, we have an international court, but we don't follow it. So how are they going to implement it on anyone else? How is it going to have any sort of say in the future if nothing is implemented on them? And how will they be able to criticize Russia for not complying if they're not complying, right? That's why they started making these statements ever since South Africa raised the claim against Israel, took them to the ICJ, and they started saying, you know, we only support Israel within international law, and to our knowledge, they haven't committed genocide. But so there is a level of worry, and Israel is worried from the fact that Western governments would take that into consideration because it's their baby. But again, me, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic, by the way, don't get me wrong, but from the course of history, you know, ever since Israel's establishment, we haven't seen any significant action being taken by the UN, nor anyone really like the UN. So I hope that clarifies. That scary sight, love from Finland. Brother, much love back to all of you. Van Moore, will the US leave Syria and Iraq? Well, they just said a month ago that they're sending 1,500 extra troops. They're warmongers. I mean, what they've done with with Russia just proves that these people are warmongers. And think for a second, by the way, just remember this, please. They banned RT, they banned Russian media from Western crowds for 2 years now. So you cannot, unless you dig yourself and go directly to their websites or go on platforms that allow them, like Rumble, right? You don't know what the Russians are saying. And in many ways, these people are more level-headed than leaders in the West, even the Chinese leaders. They have more sense, more composure, more sense of responsibility. And it seems like they even refuse to be dragged into a world war that the United States and the EU try to push them to. And obviously it's good, because who wants a world war? No one wants a world war. We want world peace. You know, we want an era where people would stop fighting for political gain. And it is possible. It's within human capability to reach that potential, because we have shown progress in the course of history. Don't forget what the Middle Ages looked like. Okay? Now, you might laugh at me for a second by saying, look at what Israel is doing in Gaza, which is true. But in the grand scheme of things, there have been developments on a society level, on a political level, to dispute resolutions without violence. And obviously, you can't say that to people, you know, being attacked or whatever, because they need to resist. They're obliged to resist. But I'm talking in the grand scheme of things. And I speak about the military-industrial complex a lot. I even spoke about it in my book, and how the military-industrial complex makes money out of wars and profiteering on people's blood. And I even gave, a suggestion when it comes to the military-industrial complex. Like, if you want people to make money, like, let them make money doing other stuff. Let them make money doing, I don't know, space exploration. Let them make money by building campaigns to feed the poor, for heaven's sake. You know? I used to listen to Tupac when I was young, and in one of his songs he said, they've got money for wars but can't feed the poor, which is so true. You know, many people are saying this nowadays. You have money to send to all of these people, and you don't have money to end poverty, really? So yeah, another question. Mansour Shuman, no, I'm not sure exactly with regards to Mansour Shuman, to be honest with you. I hope he's well, but all it's a genocide against reporters and people who work in the media in Gaza. Over 110, Israel deliberately killed them. They tried to kill Wael al-Dahduh several times, killing most of his family. This is acts of barbarism, deliberate genocide. Do you know what I mean? But I really hope he's well. And they're doing that to reporters in the West Bank, by the way, on social media, if you follow some of them. Any recent Gully Berg, any recent clashes between Israeli and Jordan? No, on an official level, it's tense between them, you know. It's not like Jordan likes what Israel is doing. But, you know, knowing Jordan, what would you expect from them? But saying that, you know, there's frictions here and there. Where are the other questions? Um, Kate, nice question. Are there Palestinian Jews? Yes, there are Palestinian Jews. Every Jewish person who lived in Palestine previously was a Palestinian Jew. I mean, there is a famous statement from the only female Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir saying that I'm a Palestinian. She tried to say it in a way to kind of deny the existence of Palestinian people, but Freudian slip. But yeah, so anyone who was in Israel, in Palestine before Israel was established, would be considered a Jewish Palestinian. As a matter of fact, I have Jewish friends in Israel who would say that they're Jewish Palestinian. Okay, they have Palestinian, they have Israeli identity, but they'd say I'm a Jew, but I'm Palestinian because I live in occupied Palestine, right? And the same applies with, like, for example, the Shomronim. And I'd like to make a comment, right? So, about the nationality thing. I personally couldn't care less, really, about the national aspect that much. The problem is with the core problem, the injustice, the inhumanity, the oppression, the occupation. And I even had an argument once, like, no one would be where we're at and there wouldn't be these movements or anything if, let's say, for example, Israel was established and it was a democratic country, not expelling people, right? And people had their full rights in it. Would people really care that much about names or any of that? I don't think so. But the problem is they constantly try and erase that identity, which makes people stick to it more. So even before this war, not just now, they also try and say it, but before this war, they used to tell you that, a Palestinian people never existed. You never had a country, you didn't have a flag, you didn't have this and that, right? To justify the Jewish facade narrative when it comes to Israel historically. Although, if you look at history, you will find that at one point in history, there was a kingdom of Judea in the areas of the West Bank, or what they call Judea and Samaria, the Israelis, and Palestine. Palestine was traditionally the southern coast of the area. However, in modern history, and when I say modern history, I'm talking about hundreds of years, right? Even the Romans referred to it as such. It was referred to as Palestine. It wasn't referred to as Israel after the Jewish kingdoms ended. They only lasted for 160 years combined. And obviously, there's an argument that I was part of the Sham region, which is the Levant area, of course. And there's an argument that, many people colonized the area or what have you. But the fact of the matter is, people refer to it as Palestine. And our problem is the fact that Israel constantly tries to erase that narrative. That's why they have campaigns of Judaization of Palestine, like what they do in Jerusalem, an ongoing campaign to erase any Arab history, any Palestinian history, Palestinian names, trying to lure people, expel people out of their homes, buy them, put Jewish names, put Israeli flags. They're obsessive about it, They're zealous people when it comes to these things. And that's why we tell them no. No, there were, and there will remain Palestinian people. However, in the grand scheme of things, the core issue is about solving the rotten core, right? This is how I like to call it. The rotten core is supremacy, right? You need to eliminate supremacy. You need to implement justice, equality between the Jordan River and the sea. It's very simple. Yet, Western governments make it so complicated, as if it's so complicated, as if we're both equal, the Palestinians, the Israelis, poor thing, as if you're having two massive countries fighting each other with the same level of power or whatever, even though you're talking about people who are brutally oppressed under ongoing occupation for 75 years, who have every right under the sun to resist occupation. Ari Mago, Mahmoud Salam, Khan Yunis is still being targeted. Will it ever stop? Yet it will eventually stop, of course. It will eventually stop. But Khan Yunis in particular is showing them some really fierce resistance. I mean, they've had a problem with a couple of areas in Gaza. And the Hamas and the Palestinian resistance have very advanced defensive techniques that even Israel admitted. Like there was a report in Ma'arif 2 months ago saying that Hamas did not only surprise us in the attack of the 7th of October because it shocked them, it also surprised us with the defense. So they have three areas that they have lots of problems in. They have a problem in Al-Maghazi, they have a problem in Khan Yunis, and they have a problem in one area. What was the name? Sorry, slipped my mind. But Khan Yunis in particular, they have been heavily targeting it for so long because it's symbolic for Israel because Yahya Sinwar's house is there. Apparently they found his shoe that I spoke about just over a month ago. His shoe, imagine what an achievement, as if it's really his shoe. And to them, it's symbolic. Like, okay, your Hamas leader is in Khan Yunis. We want to take down Khan Yunis. But the Palestinian resistance is putting up a fight. I'm telling you, this will be taught in military academies. I mean, I've heard reports that South Korea is already teaching lessons about the 7th of October and the Palestinian resistance actions against the Israeli army. But in Khan Yunis, they lure them into certain locations and give them such hell, like Al-Maghazi. This explosion where Israel admitted 24 were killed, even though most likely the number is much higher. They dragged Israel. They acted like they weren't there. So they weren't resisting. They weren't saying anything. As if, come in, it's safe. Israel felt comfortable. They went in, they did all of that, bang, attack. Today, do you know what they did in Khan Yunis, in western Khan Yunis? That's on the outskirts of Khan Yunis as well. So Israel keeps going in and out, in and out. They're never steady because they're getting hit so badly. Hamas trapped a tunnel, Al-Qassam brigades, for Israeli soldiers, and many people were talking about the ICJ and forgot about what's happening on the ground, but this happened today. 7 Israeli soldiers went in thinking it was safe. They exploded the whole thing in them and buried them inside. And there are reports that they still haven't evacuated them, and I wouldn't be surprised if Israel leaves them, by the way, because just a few days ago, they implemented the Hannibal Directive by several airstrikes on one of their tanks, and they left the soldiers because they tried to evacuate them, and when the resistance was still attacking the helicopters, Israel said, okay, we're not able to attack it, that's it. They killed their own people. Neutral zone, thank you so much, and everyone with sending super thanks, very kind of you. Marvin Vergas, will Turkey cut oil to Israel? Apparently they're still sending oil to Israel. Any Russian-Turkey military intervention to save Palestinians? I don't think so, unless these people are threatened themselves. This is what I think. Reach for the sky. Regarding the Israel's creating the extended buffer zone, does that indicate that they expect Gazans to return to those areas? So let me give you a bit of a background. Israel had a buffer zone. After the war in 2014, which ended by a Palestinian resistance victory, they retracted from the buffer zone. So Hamas told them as conditions to the ceasefire, you need to take back that buffer zone. So Hamas came closer to Israel. And they also extended their fishing range because they also control the sea and how the Palestinians can fish for a living. They previously used to prevent them for it before 2014. But after that war happened, Hamas imposed new conditions on them. Now they're trying to create a new reality. This new reality is a new buffer zone. That's why they're demolishing so many. That's why they're demolishing so many buildings in Gaza to create a new buffer zone between the Palestinian people and the settlers in southern Israel surrounding Gaza, in hope to show that because obviously these people are fuming. They're saying we're not going to go back to our kibbutzes unless there's a safe reality. So what they're saying is, by doing that, Israel is saying, okay, let's say we ended the war without demolishing Hamas because that's mission impossible. I said it, they wrote their own destiny when they said we're going to demolish the Hamas because they never will, as long as they exist as they are. But this is a way to tell the Israeli citizens, look, I haven't demolished Hamas, but this is a new reality. You have a new buffer zone. It's safe for you to go back because we took down everything from the border, from our border with Gaza, 600, 700 or 800 meters in, for example, or whatever it is, and in hope for Israelis to feel more safe to go back. So they are trying to create a buffer zone. But again, it's all talks now, they're demolishing, they have plans, they have resettlement plans in Gaza. But that all, we will see where it will eventually lead, depending on the outcome of the war. Rainbow Peace, thank you. Let me see if we have any other questions. Sorry if I'm not getting all of the messages probably here. Josie, hello everyone. Sailing with John, do you think the occupation ending in the years ahead? It will eventually end. It will eventually end because, injustice can't last forever, no matter how strong, the empire is or the occupier. And rights are not lost as long as there are people asking for them. That's a saying in Arabic. مَا ضَاعَ حَقٌّ وَرَاءَهُ مُطَالِبٌ. You never lose a right as long as someone is asking for it. And Palestinians won't give up. What else do we have in terms of questions? Let me have a look. Regina Damian, it was Judea before and Canaan before that, correct? It was Canaan originally. So the Canaanites were there. And because the Canaanites, the descendants of ancient, Noah and Adam. With regards to Judea, Judea was there on parts of Israel in Judea and Samaria, Then it expanded, and then you simultaneously had the Palestine area, which was historically from the Gaza region towards Ashdod, at certain points up until almost Jaffa, and across towards the parts of the West Bank. Steve Holmes, what is happening to the Armenians in Jerusalem? Good question. So Jerusalem, especially when you talk about the old city, so that's Eastern Jerusalem. Jerusalem has quarters. There's the Christian quarter, the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter. And the Armenians, and obviously have so many churches, so many parts belong to multiple churches. Like you have Orthodox churches, Latin churches, many churches. And some of them are the Armenian. They hold, obviously, the Christian churches, they hold very ancient property, right, in Jerusalem. And Israel constantly tries to get hold of the ancient properties and lands in Jerusalem, as if it is trying to occupy everything up until they destroy Al-Aqsa. So the Christians traditionally refused to sell them. So they found someone who apparently betrayed the community, the Armenian Christian community. And he made a deal with a business person from Australia who was backed by Israel, because sometimes to lure Palestinians to sell, they will act as if they're not Israelis because the Palestinians wouldn't want to sell to Israelis. So they'll act like, oh, I'm a business person from, and they'll bring Arab people as well, acting like they want to buy, to try and convince them as if it's not for Israel. But then the ultimate holding will be to Israel, or that relevant party will eventually sell the property to Israel. This guy went and sold the property without telling the Armenian community, and he fled the country. And they're fuming about him, and they're telling Israel, you can't take control of this place because it happened without due diligence. Now, Israel's argument is this person was in charge, we made the transaction, the money was paid, it's no longer yours. So it's still tense when it comes to that, and the Armenian community over there, they're still battling it to try and rehold. But that's like the ongoing story. They always try and force people out, either by force, expel them and take their place, or by offers, or by dodgy, shady deals. Let me see if we have any more questions. Arimagu, thank you. Marvin Vergas, is it true Druze don't like Palestinians? Heard Druze used in IDF against Palestinians. So the Druze is a community that was there before Israel, and it's a sect that was traditionally in Islam, and it went out as a subsect from the Shia sect in Islam. And they were obviously a minority for the majority of the time. Now, they were persecuted previously in certain periods, and the community of the Druze as a whole, they have a sense of, we need to protect ourselves. right? And traditionally, they used to live on mountains, and that's still the case. When Israel was established, obviously, the colonial mindset and mentality, they divide and conquer. So they made deals with the Jews community. They weren't all happy with it, to be fair. Um, but they obviously need to follow their spiritual leaders. I mean, the Jews community, they're very strict when it comes to listening to their spiritual leaders. But don't get me wrong, some people are anti all of that from them. But we're saying in general, because in general, apart from Jewish people, the Jews community are the most active in the Israeli army. So there's conscription in the Druze community. And obviously, that's not to say there's no frictions between them, but they're the most closely allied small group that's non-Jewish with Israel as a country. And they have exemptions when it comes to religious people, similar to Orthodox Jews, but that's now changing with Orthodox Jews because the levels of people who are refusing to go to the Israeli army increased severely in the past 20 years. So it's not that they hate or not hate. I think they try and save themselves. Obviously, from a Palestinian perspective, uh, if you're saying about the Palestinians who are active in fighting Israel, if you've positioned yourself with the enemy, you're an enemy. It doesn't matter who you are. So you'll have a couple of Muslims, for example, in the IDF. But again, the Palestinian citizens of Israel that are non-Druze, Christians and Muslims particularly, so you're talking about 0.01% or less, whereas the Druze community, they do. But in terms of the hate, like, I think personally they're looking out for their own interest, but there's increasing internal division between them and disagreement, especially after the nation-state law came into power, because it didn't recognize them even as having a right to the state. It says that Israel only belonged to the Jewish people. So they were fuming about that. They were like, we sacrificed our life for you, and you say we have a brotherly blood pact between us, and this is what you do to us. So that was the criticism from many in the Druze community. So that's the situation with them. Jack LaRoche, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Given Netanyahu has already stated Israel will not stop doing what it is doing, genocide, even in the face of negative ICJ ruling against them, how do you think the world will respond? Well, they're trying to get their way out of it. Because although Netanyahu said it won't stop us previously, in his direct response today, both in Hebrew and in English, he didn't outright say we're not going to listen to the ICJ. As a matter of fact, he reiterated that we only do things in line with international law, and the accusations that we're committing crimes against humanity and genocide are absurd. And he obviously stated again, you're doing this because of the Jewish state, this anti-Semitic, all of these things. So he is worried about how the world would respond. And obviously the world, when we talk about the world, right? The minority elite in several Western countries, because when we use the term international community or the world, right, they use these terms to legitimize what they do as if they represent the world. Dude, you're not representing 10%, not even with the population, right? Tell me how many people in the United States or in Western countries are agreeing with their governments as to what they're doing with supporting Israel. How many? Even when you talk about Russia, which is closer to home. How many? So, but they are feeling the pressure, and they're trying to get their way around it. And they are angry to an extent with Netanyahu because generally with Israeli leaders, they listen to the United States and some of their closest allies and not take it a step too far, because the United States wants Israel there and they don't want them to risk themselves being eliminated, right? Which is also absurd. It's like, why? You can also have interests when you have democracy too. But this highlights that there are reasons beyond Israel, like the division between the Arab world and the Muslim world, for example, not having any sort of economic union between Africa and the Middle East, right? That is colonial supremacist mentality. So it's beyond reason sometimes. But yeah, they're trying to work their way around it. Mel gone. The ICJ ruling, would that hinder or totally cut Saudi and Israeli normalization? Well, the Saudi government, the foreign minister, he recently stated that they're willing to reach an agreement with Israel if they reach a deal with the Palestinians. I mean, like I said, the Saudi regime has been dedicated to the creation of a Jewish state. They gave their agreement to the British Empire previously. But in terms of having full normalization, don't forget that they are a country and they have interests and they can use leverage. Um, Obviously, all of the responses of Arab states when it comes to this genocide, in my opinion, have been appalling. We expected more, but from an internal policy making, from an internal security view, from a long-term strategic point of view, they would look at their own interests. So you would need to reach a deal before the Saudis say, I'm going to make peace with you. So I don't think it would do a lot unless it will eventually lead to a solution. Um, Fetefan, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. What are your thoughts on the alleged 600 billion to $1 trillion of natural gas that exists under parts of Gaza? Israel allegedly wants this natural gas to sell it to Europe. Of course, and there are plans, and there have been plans for a while, and you have the plans for the Ben Gurion Canal to compete with the Suez Canal, which is a problem for Egypt. And you have the gas off the shores of Gaza, like you've had the feud off the shores of Lebanon and the feud of, in many parts of the Mediterranean, eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, where you had massive conflicts that included Turkey and other countries. So, yeah, of course they want it. And this just proves that there is a plan before the 7th of October. And for those of you who don't know, Israel already handed out exploration contracts 2 weeks after the 7th of October. So they used it as an opportunity to hand out these contracts for gas exploration companies to come and explore. And that's why obviously they want to expel the population of Gaza from a long time ago. And many people say they to some extent allowed the 7th of October to happen, although I truly believe the 7th of October was very meticulously planned by Hamas and the Palestinian resistance. And Israel, if they would have known something about it, they probably wouldn't have expected the scale. But the implementation of such contract awarding, such policies, such actions, following that just shows that there was something planned. Beautiful day, Amazon unboxing. Thank you very, very much. Giovanni Di Capo, why won't the West Bank residents resist? Because the resistance, the armed resistance, I would assume you mean the physical resistance in the West Bank. Number one, there is activity. It's not that there isn't, but you hardly hear any coverage of it in mainstream media, particularly in the areas of Jenin and Tul Karim, some parts of Nablus, some parts of Hebron, and some scatters all across, despite ongoing actions from Israel and the Palestinian Authority to take down any sort of armed resistance in the West Bank. So obviously after, many attacks used to go out of the West Bank previously, then Israel built the wall and they continued to increasingly weaken the resistance. But the primary reason that there is no physical armed resistance to at the level of Gaza, for example, is the existence of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and them having security agreements that are combined and joint with Israel and the United States administration. But there are actions, you're just not hearing them, you're not seeing them. Many of them are obviously on Arab media, or if you're in on social media, some networks or some Telegram groups, you'll see what's happening. But they obviously won't. And I hope that answered your second question, why they won't resist on a larger scale. And don't forget, Israel imprisoned over 6,255 residents from the West Bank since the 7th of October. Don't forget that. And they also killed 400 people. They killed people left, right, and center. They petrify people, including children. Like I saw so many videos. Sometimes you need to stop watching, really. But kids walking, they shoot them, they aim and shoot them. They haven't done anything. The other day they killed an infant with his mother and father in a car because, according to them, they were driving too fast to a checkpoint. Josie Alvarado, Mahmoud, you and my son Nabil look so much alike. I'm glad to hear that. Abbas Gamer, what's the best outcome we can hope for the Palestine after this war? The best outcome that I can hope for is the total dismantling of apartheid regime. Some people would call it to the end of Israel as we know it. And that's, again, from my perspective, not a call to end Jewish people's right to statehood or anything of the sort, like the way they want to portray it, but rather the dismantling of the regime of ethnic supremacy and religious supremacy, Jewish supremacy, that exists in Israel, and the implementation of a full democratic country with equal rights, including the historical rights of the Palestinian refugees, primarily the Palestinian refugees, obviously, compensating them as well. And that is possible, that is achievable. That's why I wrote my book, and I wrote so many points that are doable. And obviously, if people put in effort in that, there's enough money if there's will to do it. And there are enough people who would support the idea in terms of funding. Let's see. if we have any more questions. Okay. Gully Gullible, you're welcome. A pleasure. Um, okay. Let's go to this question. Where was that? Where did it go? Faiz Patel. And if anyone has any more questions, just post them now so we can just go through the last couple of questions. I can't believe we've been together for almost an hour and a half. Time flies. Faiz Patel, how does work on two-state solution? So I assume you were asking how would it work on a two-state solution. I mean, the proposal of a two-state solution is the Palestinians getting the West Bank and Gaza, or what's called the pre-1967 borders, the areas that Israel occupied in 1967, and the Palestinians having a state. Now, I don't think that's ever going to happen, because the only time that was about to happen was during the era, sorry, talking makes you thirsty, was during the era of Yitzhak Rabin, who was the prime minister in Israel, who was assassinated by a far-right figure. That was a far-right figure who's supported by current ministers in the Israeli government. Imagine that. So this man was about to reach peace with the Palestinians and with the Syrians. He was about to reach a deal. He was going towards a deal that will give the Palestinians statehood, and he had plans to withdraw from the Golan Heights and return them to the Syrians, and there were secret talks behind him, with him and the Syrian regime. But back then, you hardly had any settlements in the West Bank. There were settlements, you had tens or just over 100,000 people. But ever since he was assassinated, that idea has been going further and further and further because of Israel and because of the Palestinian Authority. Because the Palestinian Authority was seeing what's happening and enabling it alongside of Israel. So they were shooting themselves in the foot. And now the idea, if you want to talk about it from like a physical perspective, it's not implementable. You would have so many enclaves that would have to belong to Israel. Israel controls the resources, the water, the strategic points. It has checkpoints everywhere. They have almost 800,000 settlers, 1,000,000 people. What are you going to do with them, right? Are you going to expel all of them? That'll create civil war. But what you can do, or what's in the power of like governments to do in the West, right? And what's possible is to put pressure on Israel to dismantle its apartheid regime altogether and finally reach a solution. Deep 007, how is hostage talks now? The latest updates when it comes to the hostage talks is the recent deal that the Mossad worked on alongside the Qataris and the Egyptians, and the last proposal that we didn't officially hear but heard reports of in the media, in Israeli media, in Arab media too, was a temporary ceasefire for 2 months, where Hamas would release Israeli prisoners and Israel would release Palestinian prisoners, including ones who have heavy sentences and leading figures. But Hamas said it doesn't give us guarantees that Israel won't restart the war, and that would go against their main term. Since the temporary ceasefire ended, they told Israel, and they still stick by it. And again, remember, this is a position of strength. You only do that if you're in a position of strength. So this highlights how strong Hamas and the Palestinian resistance are against Israel. Israel is the weak side. Despite all of this, it's a paper tiger. And they said, we won't agree from the ending of the temporary ceasefire because Israel broke the temporary ceasefire. Yoav Gallant signed the breaking of the temporary ceasefire. They told them from then, we won't agree to another hostage deal, another prisoner swap, unless you end the war. That was back then. Later, we started to hear more details because more things were leaked to the media. And them and the PIJ, they started saying that, and now Hamas officially say it. I mean, their spokespersons and senior figures in Lebanon and outside of Lebanon, they say there is no prisoner deal unless you completely end the war and completely withdraw from Gaza and let us rebuild Gaza and allow in aid. So, and it's right for them to put these conditions, because if they agree to another temporary ceasefire, they will put themselves in square one, at the mercy of Israel. And history has shown and proven time after time that you don't put yourself under the mercy of Israel, because they have no mercy. And they constantly lie and breach agreements and kill and oppress and occupy. So now they're telling them, okay, you want to continue the war? Go ahead. Look at the chaos that's happening in Israel. Like everything, if you look at it carefully, everything that Israel is trying to do to the Palestinian people in Gaza is happening to them willingly. So they're trying to expel them. The Palestinians are sticking to their land. Israelis are expelling themselves from Israel. Over 2.5 million now outside of Israel. 80% don't want to go back. Between the Jordan River and the sea, now, you're talking about, so West Bank, Israel, Gaza, you're talking about 7.6 million Palestinians, Arabs, Christians, Muslims, and less than 4.9 million Israeli Jews. Remember that. This is the situation. We already have a majority Palestinian between the Jordan River and the sea since 2016, approximately. That's why Israel wants to encourage constantly people to come to Israel. They always have advertisements and campaigns of people returning to Israel, because it's a military settler colonial state that's built on, people and war, right? And they don't have the people. So I hope that clarifies. Karen Smetanovska, is the book online? My book, yes. MahmoodOD.com. Go get it for free. MahmoodOD.com. Gully Gullible, what is the situation in prayers in Al-Aqsa? Very limited. They obviously restrict people as and when they want to. Many times, especially since the 7th of October, they've restricted entry on Friday prayers mainly, because Israel is mainly worried about Friday prayers, where many people gather, and sometimes there are frictions, mostly because of Israeli forces. They're brutal. They go in the mosque, they shoot at people. Like when I last visited Al-Aqsa about 2 years ago, they always renew and add glasses inside full of grenades that Israel threw at them inside Masjid al-Aqsa. Imagine that. And no international condemnation on mainstream media. You don't see these things. But you're there. When you go and visit, people check you. Oh, why are you coming? Are you Muslim? What are you doing here? Do you know what I mean? And now they restrict people less than 45, I think, from doing Friday prayers. Some of them pray outside and then they still shoot at them. I mean, I was once put in that situation when I was in Jerusalem, where they weren't allowing us to go in and people were like gathering outside. And then they start shooting gas bombs at you and you need to run away from them. Anit Kadura, will the hostages be set free as agreed by the court? I haven't seen that clause in the court. I mean, the orders, unless I missed it, really. But again, that won't happen unless there's a deal. That won't happen unless there's a deal, no matter what the ICJ say. Giovanni, God bless you too, my friend. Oh, you're Afghan. Nice. I thought Giovanni Di Capo. I thought Italia. Casey, Al-Aqsa, what would happen if Israel takes it over? They try and take it over. Obviously, they would spark outrage. Listen, they burnt it in 1968, if I'm not mistaken, deliberately. And obviously, the Palestinians rebuilt it with the support of some countries, financial support. If they take it over, you know what I think? I think killing people, you know, there's a narration on the, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that he would rather the Kaaba would be ruined stone by stone than a believer dying or a believer losing blood or something like that. Peace be upon him. And the same applies really when you talk about land and stones and the blood of people. What's more important is to stop their genocide in Gaza. And with regards to Al-Aqsa, you will always have the Palestinian people fighting for Al-Aqsa. I mean, one of the main motives for Hamas and the Palestinian resistance is Al-Aqsa. As a matter of fact, if you look into the escalation in 2021, it started because Israel was having constant attacks and provocations on Al-Aqsa. And they thought the Hamas are just comfortable ruling Gaza and getting money in, and they're not interested. And then they warned them. MahmoodOD, the military commander of Al-Qassam Brigade, he sent Israel an ultimatum. He told them, cancel the hate march by 6 p.m. Otherwise, we're attacking you. They didn't listen. And they launched rockets on Jerusalem, Hamas, back then. And then it sparked a temporary escalation that ended relatively quickly. It was nowhere near what happened now. This is the biggest escalation since the Nakba. But they need to be careful with what they do to Al-Aqsa because it means a lot to a lot of people. Mark B, how do you think this will end? I usually have an expectation that doesn't stem out of too much, intelligence or whatever, but because of a pattern that we've seen previously. And that pattern was escalation, big escalation, deal, quiet. This is the norm, okay? And after 2021, I got sick of it, and that's why I wrote a book. I was like, stop escalating, and here's the solution. Just implement equality and dismantle supremacy and apartheid. But anyway, this time it's different because of the level of the attack on the 7th of October. I mean, we have never witnessed anything like this. I mean, when I saw what happened, I was shocked. Like Hamas taking down a whole Gaza division, one of the most sophisticated divisions, and I taking them down, hours, recording themselves inside of Israel. What's happening? So if Israel wants to reach a deal, like let's talk from an Israeli perspective. If Israel wants to reach a deal, they will be telling themselves, I'm agreeing to reach a deal with someone who can hurt me really badly. So they don't want to they don't want them to be able to hurt them badly, right? From Hamas's perspective and the Gazans' perspective, really, Palestine, most of them in Gaza, they have nothing to lose. Do you know what I mean? We're dying anyway. You know, life is temporary. We're all gonna die eventually, and we'd rather die fighting than living undignified and under brutality and oppression. So Israel would need to have a shameful submission to reach a deal, which could be a scenario. If they're thinking of prolonging this further, Israel, and not stopping the war and continuing, it would only be, in my opinion, a matter of time up until something far bigger blows up and Israel ceases to exist as we know it at the moment. This is what I think, 2 ways ahead. Did you see the map that Israel presented to the UN before the 7th of October? That's Anita. Yeah, is that the one that included the Greater Israel that the Israeli finance minister published? That's their plan. Greater Israel is from the Nile to the Euphrates. They wanted Cairo after Sinai. Don't forget that. They wanted to reach Iraq. Even after the war in Iraq, if some of you recall, they did these Babylonian Talmudian rituals in some parts of Iraq as if they were celebrating the fact that Israel reached Iraq after the United States war. So they still have these fantasies. Two-state solution is always espoused, proposed by Westerners. I mean, you mean like Western governments? That should speak volumes about their feasibility and desirability. Everyone is saying lip service, two-state solution. What are you talking about? What have you done to reach a two-state solution? Whether you're the British government or the US administration. Oh, stop the settlements, Israel, stop them. You know, you have a drugged up psychopath with weapons roaming around shooting people, and it's like US, his daddy, is telling them, oh, stop, sweetheart, enough, don't shoot too much. This is what they're doing with the two-state solution thing, or, you know, a de-escalation. It's pathetic. Huberto Cat, hi, I sub to you. Welcome aboard, my friend. Okay. Let's see if we have any more questions. Okay, so no more questions, I assume, unless I missed something, and sorry if I did, because there's a lot of comments. But yeah, let's finish it here, guys, then. Give money, you're the man. No, you're the man. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being with me. It was really nice speaking to you. I can't believe we've been speaking for 1 hour, 45 minutes. That was a nice Friday evening, or morning, or afternoon, wherever you are in this part of the world. Muhammad, thank you, brother. I didn't see you in the gym on Saturday. And I'll do another live stream soon, hopefully, guys. And Muhammad, I was there. I was in the morning. I'm an early bird. You're welcome, everyone. I'll hopefully make another live stream soon. So and obviously discuss anything, any updates. Love all of you. Thank you very much. and then you can ask me more questions or whatever. If you have any, obviously, comments, you can comment on my community tab too, or in the next videos that I'm gonna be publishing in the next few days. Much love to all of you. Thank you very much for joining me and for your beautiful comments and support. I love all of you very, very much. And I will hopefully see you soon in the next video. So take care, have a good evening, rest this weekend, enjoy yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.